What if I told you that some of the most powerful covert operations in history were funded by illegal drug trafficking? Imagine a world where drugs, politics, and government agencies intertwine in ways that shape not only international relations, but also led to some of the darkest tragedies ever witnessed.
The Office of Strategic Services, the wartime predecessor to the CIA, laid the groundwork for a disastrous illegal empire built on narcotic smuggling, extortion, and human suffering.
Today we dive into the shocking truth about how the CIA allegedly used drug trafficking to finance its operations. Along the way, we'll explore the stories of Enrique Kiki Camarena, Santi Bario, Barry Seal, the notorious French Connection, and the secretive Operation X, all of which unravel the complex web of drugs, power, and covert actions. To understand how this story begins, we need to travel back to the Cold War, a time when the U.S. was locked in a high-stakes battle against communism.
Let me ask you, sir, just how serious a threat to our national security are these communist subversive activities in the United States today?
Well, I think they're serious. I think it's a matter that we should continue to give great care and attention to.
The CIA, tasked with preventing the spread of Soviet influence around the world, found itself short on cash to fund its covert operations. Instead of relying on official funding, which required congressional oversight, the CIA allegedly turned to drug trafficking to generate the untraceable money it needed.
The goal of this network was to counter global communism through the smuggling, distribution, and sale of opiates and cocaine across the globe.
This gave rise to Operation X, a clandestine operation in which profits from the global drug trade were used to finance CIA activities in regions critical to U.S. interests. Why drugs?
This is a sort of a game, not stepping on the lines and cracks. It's kind of fun. But if you play it long enough, it can get to be a habit. Drugs are like that.
In the 1960s and 1970s, Latin America and Southeast Asia were major drug production regions, particularly for heroin and cocaine. These areas were not only critical to the drug supply, but also strategically important in the fight against communism.
The film you are seeing was made by Signal Corps photographers of the United States Army. Now to the Soviet version, complete with Korean dialogue.
By leveraging the drug trade, the CIA could fund its covert operations while also destabilizing regions with communist influence. Operation X wasn't just about money. It was a geopolitical strategy designed to achieve U.S. objectives using illicit means. But how did the CIA, an agency sworn to protect U.S. interests, end up entangled with drug traffickers?
As disappointed as I may be in some who serve me, I am still the one who must answer to the American people for this behavior. And as personally distasteful as I find secret bank accounts and diverted funds, well, as the Navy would say, this happened on my watch. Let's start with the part that is the most controversial.
One of the most notorious examples of CIA involvement in drug trafficking comes from the Iran-Contra Affair.
While American troops were being deployed to 4 training locations far away from battle zones, Honduran warplanes were bombing Nicaraguan positions in response to the Sandinistas placing down landmines as they withdrew toward the border.
In the 1980s, the CIA was accused of facilitating the smuggling of cocaine into the U.S. to fund the Contras, a Nicaraguan rebel group fighting the communist Sandinista government.
Possibility exists that U.S. air support may be used to transport Honduran troops to the border for retaliatory strikes.
And I could foresee that happening.
Has an official request come through to your knowledge yet?
Not to my knowledge.
But the CIA's links to the drug trade didn't start in the 1980s. During the Vietnam War, the CIA worked closely with the Hmong tribes in Laos who were deeply involved in the opium trade.
A ton of cocaine, pure cocaine worth hundreds of millions, is smuggled into the United States. Sound familiar? Not the way this ton of cocaine got here.
In exchange for their military cooperation against north of Vietnam, the CIA allegedly turned a blind eye to the Hmong opium production, allowing the trade to flourish. Profits from this trade were used to fund covert military operations throughout Southeast Asia. Agencies' willingness to engage with drug traffickers was a recurring pattern, one that spanned continents and decades.
According to what the former head of the Drug Enforcement Administration told Mike Wallace, this drug shipment got here courtesy of what he calls drug trafficking by the CIA.
This brings us to Operation X, a secret program that further cemented the CIA's involvement in global drug trafficking. The Covert Action Document, a vital source of information on these operations, describes how Operation X allowed the CIA to covertly fund its anti-communist campaigns by facilitating drug smuggling through regions like the Golden Triangle in Southeast Asia.
Southeast Asia's Golden Triangle refers to an area covering the intersecting borders of Myanmar, Laos, and Thailand. In recent years, this region has emerged as the world's fastest growing source of methamphetamine, supplying the Asian and Australian markets, where it's known as yaba or ice.
But it wasn't just Southeast Asia where the CIA turned a blind eye to the drug trade. Enter the French Connection, one of the most famous international drug smuggling operations in history. In the 1950s and 60s, this heroin trafficking network smuggled drugs from Turkey through France and into the United States.
And what reason did the CIA have for promoting this drug smuggling?
Well, the only rationale that's ever been offered is that this would lead to some valuable drug intelligence.
At its height, the French Connection was responsible for much of the heroin flowing into America. While this network was widely publicized after law enforcement agencies cracked down on it, some argue that intelligence agencies, possibly including the CIA, allowed the network to operate as long as it aligned with their broader geological objectives.
But you weren't going to stop them in Miami or Houston or wherever. These drugs were simply going to go to the United States and then go into the traffic and eventually reach the streets.
That's what they wanted to do, yes.
The heroin profits allegedly helped finance anti-communist efforts in Indochina, particularly in Vietnam. This theory suggests that during the post-World War II era, U.S. and French intelligence agencies may have been quietly supporting the French Connection to fund covert operations in Southeast Asia, where communism was spreading rapidly.
Nearly as important as its natural wealth is Southeast Asia's key strategic position astride the main lines of communication between Europe and the Far East. These were tempting economic and military rewards which led the colonial powers to seek control over these countries.
The question remains, how many of these drug networks were allowed to thrive as long as they helped further geopolitical objectives? Now let's turn to the tragic story of Enrique Kiki Camarena, whose relentless fight against the drug trade cost him his life. Kiki was a DEA agent stationed in Mexico during the 1980s.
America first saw Enrique Camarena 33 years ago when the death of his father, Kiki Camarena, made national news.
He was investigating the Guadalajara cartel, one of the most powerful drug trafficking organizations in the world. As Kiki dug deeper, he reportedly began to uncover evidence linking the cartel not just to Mexican officials, but to the CIA itself. According to some sources, Kiki discovered that the CIA was turning a blind eye to the cartel's operations, or even facilitating them, because the profits were being used to fund U.S. operations in Central America, particularly to arm the Contras in Nicaragua.
So here you got Jim Campbell, chief of station, who knows about this. Mark McFarland, CIA officer, who knows about this, and are stimulating this business of sending what are uncontrolled deliveries of drugs, smuggling drugs into the United States, right?
Right.
In 1985, Kiki was kidnapped, tortured, and murdered by the Guadalajara cartel.
One late-night conversation with his father stuck in his mind.
He asked me, what do you want to be when you grow up? I said, I want to be just like you. And the answer was a swift, no, you're not. Wasn't going to have a law enforcement son.
His death was a turning point in the war on drugs and sparked international outrage, but it also raised serious questions. Did Kiki uncover too much? Was his murder a cover-up to protect the CIA's involvement in drug trafficking? Many believe Kiki's death wasn't just about the cartel protecting his turf. It was about silencing someone who was getting too close to exposing the CIA's role in the global drug trade. Barry Seal's story adds another layer to the shadowy connections between drug traffickers and the CIA.
Good evening, I'm John Camp. In September 1984, I received a telephone call from a man named Barry Seal, who claimed he was being treated unfairly by law enforcement officials in Baton Rouge.
A notorious drug smuggler, Seal flew plane loads of cocaine from Colombia into the U.S. throughout the 1970s and 80s. But Seal wasn't just any smuggler. He later claimed that he was working with the CIA, helping the agency carry out covert operations while simultaneously smuggling drugs for the Medellin cartel led by Pablo Escobar.
I set up a meeting with Seal at which he told me a bizarre story about his undercover exploits while working with Miami drug agents, and even the CIA.
Seal's ties to the CIA allegedly began when he started working as an informant for the DEA, providing information on cartel operations. However, it's been claimed that the CIA turned a blind eye to his drug smuggling because he was helping them move weapons and money for covert operations, including aiding the Contras in Nicaragua.
We have a gentleman down in Nicaragua who is on contract to the CIA, advising supposedly on military tactics, the Contras.
Mr. President, you are implying then that the CIA in Nicaragua is directing the Contras there.
I'm afraid I misspoke when I said a CIA head in Nicaragua. There's not someone there directing all of this activity.
Seal's life was a perfect example of how deeply intertwined the worlds of drug trafficking and covert government operations had become.
And the exciting thing in life to me is to get into a life-threatening situation. Now that's excitement.
Once again, our lead story, Barry Seal, an airline pilot turned drug smuggler and soldier of fortune, has been assassinated.
His murder further illustrates the dangerous and murky world of drug trafficking, where informants, smugglers, and government agents often found themselves caught between criminal organizations and government interests. Let's now turn to the lesser-known but equally tragic story of Santi Bario, a DEA agent whose life and death highlight the dangers faced by those who get too close to uncovering the truth. Santi Bario worked undercover in South America, where he risked his life infiltrating some of the world's most dangerous drug cartels.
Santi Bario was a DEA agent who worked for me in New York.
According to former DEA agent Michael Levine, Bario is uncovering evidence that the CIA was involved in drug trafficking, working with cartels to finance their covert operations.
Worked for CIA, worked for everybody in the world who wanted this guy, who was really something out of a movie, but he was a DEA agent.
Barrio's investigation reportedly threatened to expose the agency's connections to these criminal organizations, and this placed him in the crosshairs of forces much more powerful than any cartel.
And I'm in Argentina. I get word that Santi Bario was arrested by DEA Internal Affairs for smuggling heroin into the United States across the Mexican border.
Tragically, Santi Bario died before he could fully expose what he had uncovered. Levine describes Bario as someone who was betrayed by the very government he worked for.
And Santi was not a guy, we couldn't believe he did this. And as it turns out, he was cleared posthumously. What happened is he took a bite of a peanut butter sandwich one day while in jail, waiting to go to trial. And all of us who knew Santi were waiting to see what truths would come out. Holy crap, this guy knew where everything was buried. You know, they really gonna put him on trial?
His death, like Kiki Camarena's, represents a symbol of how dangerous it can be to get too close to the truth when it comes to uncovering the murky alliances between intelligence agencies and drug traffickers.
Well, he takes a bite of a peanut butter sandwiches, falls down in convulsions, goes into a coma. First, the first physical examination results in findings that he had strychnine in his blood. That disappeared.
The consequences of the CIA's alleged involvement in drug trafficking were not just felt by individuals like Kiki Camarena, Barry Seal, and Santi Bario. These operations had far-reaching effects on global politics. In Latin America, the CIA's partnerships with drug cartels and paramilitary groups fueled decades of violence, corruption, and instability.
I know that many of you come from somewhat warmer climates and aren't accustomed to this Washington deep freeze, but I'll hope that the warmth of our hospitalities help make up for the temperature outside.
Governments were destabilized, and drug cartels became so powerful that they often rivaled national governments in terms of influence and resources. In Southeast Asia, where the CIA worked with opium traffickers during the Vietnam War, the drug trade became institutionalized, creating powerful cartels that continue to operate today.
And now moving to southern Mexico, which is grappling with deadly cartel violence. More than 4,000 residents were forced to flee the town of Tia after drug cartels opened fire and burnt down their homes.
These covert operations left a legacy of instability, fueling anti-American sentiment and undermining efforts to combat the drug trade in the regions the CIA once sought to control. In the United States, the effects were equally devastating.
The drug's so powerful it will empty the money from your pockets, make you sell the watch off your wrist, the clothes off your back.
The crack cocaine epidemic of the 1980s, which disproportionately affected urban communities, was fueled in part by the very drugs that flowed into the U.S. as a result of CIA-backed operations. The human cost of these covert actions was immense, with addiction, crime, and violence tearing apart communities and lives. The human toll of the CIA's alleged involvement in drug trafficking can't be overstated. In the U.S., the crack epidemic decimated entire neighborhoods, particularly in low-income, predominantly African-American communities.
And this is the most addicting thing that probably ever existed in the world, you know? It will make you a slave.
Leroy Johnson has been addicted to crack for more than a year. He says he works these streets at night, sometimes selling marijuana to finance his crack habit.
In Latin America and Southeast Asia, the regions where the CIA partnered with drug traffickers were left with legacies of violence, corruption, and political instability. Cartels became powerful forces, corrupting governments and fueling conflicts that continue to this day. When the very agencies designed to protect the public are implicated in illegal activities like drug trafficking, it undermines faith in democracy, the rule of law, and justice.
And he says the following: Mike, right now, there are 10 lawyers sitting in one big room reading every page of your book, looking for a reason to indict you.
The story of the CIA's involvement in drug trafficking is one of the most shocking and controversial chapters in modern history. From Operation X to the French Connection and the tragic stories of Kiki Camarena, Santi Bario, and Barry Seal, we've seen how the pursuit of power and money led to devastating consequences on a global scale.
Then he said, just one word: beware of a peanut butter sandwich. And of course, the peanut butter sandwich was symbolic of DEA Agent Santi Bario, who died in a jail cell after allegedly swallowing peanut butter, and it choked him. Everyone in the Drug Enforcement Administration from that point on understood what a peanut butter sandwich is.
If this exploration into one of history's darkest secrets has left you wanting to know more, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that uncover the hidden truths behind world events. And if you're curious about other covert operations or the war on drugs, check out our other videos like this one on Operation Gladio, where NATO left behind forces in Europe that led to terrorism and violence.